Hello and welcome to the What If podcast. Today we are talking about policy making and we are going to be looking at some of Zimbabwe's policies. What have we gotten right? I think we have good people who come up with great strategy, but it doesn't seem like the strategy is working. We look at the NDS, we look at Vision 2030. What exactly are we getting wrong? Eddah, will come to you. So you deal with civic engagement, how citizens participate in public policy, how they are engaged. What are your thoughts on the current trend in Zimbabwe around policy making?
The policy making process has been a cult of experts. It's expert-led, expert-driven, and it's a top-down approach. We have instances, so even if we look at the policies that you mentioned, so the TSP Vision 2030, NDS 1, these are documents that were formulated, crafted in some office space with certain individuals. The consultations, yes, that might have happened were only with a certain class or category of citizen. It was not with the broader citizenry in mind. Yet these are policies that impact all of us. In the crafting of these policies, there has been a narrow approach because one, only those who've been consulted have their opinion around what the problem is and how it can then be resolved. It has also then resulted in there being limited buy-in by broader citizenry once these policies are produced. You know, we're seeing it turn again as with the introduction of this new currency. It was crafted somewhere. Yes, you can come and explain the technicalities to us of this is how the exchange rate works. It's backed by gold. But it means nothing to someone who's not been involved in the process from the get-go around what is it that we're trying to address and what solutions are we then coming up with. And this doesn't help in an atmosphere, in a space where there's been limited trust and continues to be limited distrust of the government, of government institutions and bodies by citizens. At the end of the day, even if you come up with something brilliant by yourselves, for the wider citizenry, it's not going to, succeed or work if there's no buy-in. And as a country, as a population, we're not moving together in terms of trying to then implement that policy and also assess it. That's been the other challenge, is that you craft new policies, and we've not assessed what happened with the old policies. Where did we go wrong? What then needs to change? We're reading from the same playbook every time and it's not working. So something really, as Tendai has highlighted, that, we need to pause and then take a moment and say, but what if? Because this clearly it's not working.
Yeah, it's not working. Thank you for that, Eddah. Recently, as CVU Institute, you put out a manifesto about engaged citizen participation. And in that, I think the highlights that I picked up was first naming the problem, as you've rightly said, and then listening. I think there's a difference between hearing and listening to citizens, and then actually coming back and engaging them, the ones that are left behind. So I know I'm running a bit ahead of myself. So let's come back to the naming of the issue that you spoke about. What does that look like if we're saying we're bringing in engaged citizens and naming the problem?
So I think you will be surprised if we're engaged in genuine consultations that do not include that include everyone. So I think the problem in Zimbabwe may actually not be the currency, or it may actually be something else. And I think without carrying out proper research, I think it will be trust. The real issue is that citizens do not trust office holders. There are citizens in this country who genuinely believe that this is an illegitimate government, who genuinely believe that the election results of 2023 were rigged. There are citizens like that. So if you are now asking them to participate in a process that they think is coming from a position of illegitimacy, they're going to resist. So that's one. So in a nutshell, what we have is a polarized society, along partisan lines. So we're not polarized around maybe identity issues or race, whatever. We're actually polarized around partisan issues. There are those who support fully the ruling party. Then there are those who are opposed fully to the ruling party and they support a certain political group. I don't know what name it is now, but there are those who are like that. So when you are coming together to say, the thing is, you can come up with many policy ideas, but we always say resistance is in practice. Yeah. So what we are facing now is the resistance to policy, because through practice. So now we begin to say, would the naming process have been different? It could have started off by saying, let's find ways of engendering trust. Because right now people do not even trust the idea of a gold-backed currency. Yeah? Because there's a bigger trust deficit in our country. So many office holders don't want to deal with that animal that is in the room, the elephant that is in the room. But that is where many policies are failing. Because remember, you can come up with so many policies, but the test is in the pudding. You are going to test this thing in the practice. When you're actually implementing policy and people are consuming the direct benefits of policy, that's when you'll see whether it's succeeding or not. So that's one aspect. Then number two, your biases around who you consult. So Eddah has talked about experts. But there are certain sectors that you know are going to impede or inhibit the success of a policy to do with currency changes. In that the people will earn a living or a livelihood from trading currency. It's a significant population, and you think you can address them by imprisoning them. But you could have consulted them at the beginning, could have engaged them as stakeholders as to why there's need for stability in the currency market. So at the moment we're finding we are tossing between what may look like persuasive rhetoric, then also the use of power. To say, oh, these people are trading currency, let's arrest them. But I don't even understand how that works, because we're in a multi-currency regime anyway. So all currencies are legal. So I don't understand why you say this is illegal to say some. So Zimbabwe is a very interesting case, because if all currencies are legal, we're yet to see this case pan out in the courts. Then we'll understand. But also, like you are saying, that you're going ahead of yourself. But I think we need to deal with foundational issues in a society if we're going to deal with this. Because all of us have to agree that this problem starts in 2003, when the currency really collapses, when the money does not buy anything. We've bearer checks that don't buy anything. Since then, we've been moving from one problem to the other, half-baked solutions. 2009, when we dollarized, things sort of stabilized. But now, I sense the desire on the part of government to say, we need a local currency because it gives us fiscal room. And it's very necessary. They are right, technically. But the challenge is, people don't trust them.
Right. Eddah, we're talking about this issue of trust. And in your center, you, I'm sure, are focused on how are citizens saying their pieces? How are they coming out to express their thoughts on certain issues that governments are dealing with? And building trust is not an easy thing, right? So what are your thoughts around that? How could have government done it better? How could they have built trust? It takes time. It takes effort. How could they have done it?
So I think one of the things that's underrated in terms of the policy-making process, and I think it's something that's been evident since 2003, is how it's taken on this quite adversarial, top-down approach. And again, that doesn't endear, or foster trust amongst citizens. That this is the policy, you either accept it or you don't, and if you don't, these are the punitive measures. And not taking a step back to really try and understand that what has brought this about, and why have, citizens adopted certain measures or strategies, to find a way to eke out a livelihood, to survive, to mitigate against the challenges and multiple crises that we faced as a country with regards to our economy. So the other thing as well is policy inconsistency. One of the things that we do see is that a measure or policy is put in place and it's supposed to be for everyone. But at the very same time, maybe those who have a key stake in the development of that policy and maybe those around them are then seen as exceptions to the rule or to the policy. So again, that doesn't endear trust and faith amongst citizens that you know what, this policy actually will work, or that we need to put in 100% effort as well to ensure that these policies work. At the same time, there's not been much time invested in trying to build up relationships between government and citizens. And participation, by its very nature, it's going to be messy. There's many actors, there's many opinions, but we have to go through that process. You know, government can't be looking for, and that's the challenge that it's also had, is these kind of silver bullet approaches that if we do it like this, it's going to work. And, you know, as long as we've informed, you know, which is one type of participation where you just inform citizens that this is what's going to happen, you know, again, it doesn't then foster, you know, trust and credibility. And then you ask, you know, in what ways then do citizens, you know, either outwork or show their displeasure or their lack of trust? I was actually looking at one of the national papers yesterday, and they had a photo, and it was of, you know, ladies who were selling their tomatoes at Mbaremsik, and they were charging 50 cents. But they were like, but we know that there's no 50 cents, you know. But then that means even if you're buying something, you know, you're paying, you know, $1 for it, you know. So it's, and yet these are also stakeholders that you've not consulted, you know, in the process. But at the same time, in their numbers, in their masses, can make or break, you know, for example, this, you know, the introduction of a new currency or monetary policy, you know, or economic policy. So for me, it's, you know, those day-to-day things and, you know, activities you get into, you know, for people in who use public transport, and the day ZiG is announced as a currency, you know, commuter omnibus operators will tell you that, like, we're no longer accepting, you know, bond notes, you know. So again, it's these forms and ways that, and in everyday things and situations that, you know, where citizens are interacting and engaging with each other, that then go to show, you know, that there's really a lack of faith and trust in this process and in this policy.
So I think what I'm picking up would be one of the issues is vulnerability. For you to engage citizens, at some point you have to be vulnerable enough to, okay, this is not working, and we accept that it's not working, and would like to bring you onto the table so we can work. And then also the issue with the trust is it's in what we would call it consistent inconsistency. is what we would call it. So Doc, coming back to you, how can government make it work with this engaged citizen participation? How do they engage citizens in a way that maybe doesn't make them too vulnerable? I don't know if that's possible. Is it possible?
No, that's what we're actually asking our government to be vulnerable, because trust is earned. And for you to earn the trust, given the polarization that I've made reference to, you need to be seen to be acting in the interest of citizens. And the first thing that you have to do is to, you know, it's so funny, it's such a contradiction, because at the transition stage, the current president says the voice of citizens is the voice of God. Yeah. So in the process, promising a different kind of presidency, a presidency that will be characterized by consultation. Yeah. But we still find ourselves locked within these processes that are expert driven. So that's the challenge of saying that experts, and this is the weakness of experts, they are good in their area. So for instance, there are very few experts who know how to consult. So if we're to bring a medical doctor and to begin to say to the doctor, instead of you prescribing that and trying to just do a diagnosis and say, this is our problem, let's consult people, they'll struggle because they don't have those tools. So when we look at our central bank, which is ours, yeah, is we begin to ask questions like, who does the central bank talk to? It looks like the central bank has narrowed its publics to other banks, because it's one of its role is a supervision role of commercial banks. But its actions have consequences beyond banks. It affects how we live. So you begin to ask yourself, does the central bank have mechanisms to be vulnerable? Yeah, to all of us. Can it be vulnerable to begin to say, we have in the past 5 years or 7 years come up with these measures, but we find ourselves in this place where things are collapsing. What should we do? Not what this is what we are going to do. Because if there's anything that is exhausted, it's expert opinion. I would say expertise in Zimbabwe is exhausted. They have tried all sorts of tricks and games, but what we know is it has not worked, because the previous currency was supported by some facility from Afrexim Bank. This one is supported by gold. With all those assurances, then the central bank governors are interesting individuals. Then they say, trust me. Why should we trust an individual? We didn't vote for you. We should just trust you. That's what the previous governor said, and this one also said the same. Trust me. So I think we need to go beyond those personal things. We need to trust the institution, which is called the central bank, because that's our institution. And in a democracy, the person who has that institution there should be some democratic say in how they get to that office, but also there should be some democratic ways in which they work. So one of the ways in which they should be working is talking to people, not only captains of industry or banks, because that's the challenge in Zimbabwe. We say we're consulting, you gather around the so-called captains of industry, you gather around the CEOs of banks, and you come up with a document. But we are beginning to say, go back to Mbare, the example that Eddah is giving us of saying tomatoes are going for 50 cents. Go back and understand to them what will make life easy for them. Because currency is about making it easy to trade. That's all it is. It's a representative of value. It's not the actual value. But for us is to say we need the ease of transaction as we travel in public transport, as we buy goods, as we transact with each other. That's the ease we're looking for. So when we begin to talk about ease, we may actually realize that it's not a gold-backed currency you need, but it's how we name the problem. So we actually think it has collapsed because of this, without understanding that, like I said earlier, there's a bigger problem, the problem behind the problem that we're not addressing.
And that would be the civic engagement.
The bigger problem is trust, the lack of trust. Because civic engagement helps us to foster trust. Because if citizens genuinely feel that they are part of this problem-solving process, they will also be invested in the success of the thing. At the moment, the ZiG is not our currency. It is his currency, not ours. Yes. So there are others who are invested in making sure that it collapses.
It will not.
Yeah, you see now. So they have to make sure that when we're talking about ZiG or any other thing, or NDS, whatever, it's something that we all own and run with, to say this is our policy, this is our agenda, which is the task of nation building. That's why we're always saying that it starts off by saying, do we all identify with the agenda at hand? Eddah has talked about the contradictions, that certain policies are designed for self-service, to benefit a few amongst us. So when you talk to people now, they're looking at, people are still analyzing, so who's benefiting? So who's gold? Ooh, you see now? But if we all feel that there is a problem in the country and it's affecting all of us equally, then we all have a stake in fixing it. And if we feel that those responsible for making decisions are talking to us genuinely, then we have somewhere to start.
Great. So what I'm hearing is ownership is what is needed by the citizens. So Eddah, some closing remarks around, we are here now. What can we do to fix it? How can we engage citizens? We're here, the currency is out. Is there a way that, do we have to go back to the drawing board, or can we engage them now and here?
So the RBZ is currently on a drive and, almost a public relations spiel to, get citizens on board. And when we came up with the manifesto, it was also in response to their kind of change. They have acknowledged, that citizens don't trust the central bank. But again, the governor was emphasizing that, okay, we need to change our internal structures. We need to do this. Now we have a strategy, and our strategy is in the doing. And it was just like a whole load of, just a lot of words and, energy going around the room. But I feel that at the end of the day, as they're doing this and going forward, one is to really rethink that, if they have to if things are not working well with Zig and they have to realign or re-strategize, is to come and say that, okay, this is what there is. How do we work from this? Not to go back into the drawing room and, try and restructure or rework it by themselves. But I think secondly is, as they're consulting, is to lose the adversarial tone. The statements coming out is that, we'll deal with money changes. We'll make sure they're arrested. We'll, the Zig is the currency. It's here to stay. And, I'm not going to print any money. So just taking on this adversarial tone, which I don't think is not endearing, because I think in that, taking up that posture, they're really failing to hear the concerns of citizens. I think a third thing is to recognize citizens and value them as a partner and an equal partner at all stages of the process. So even here now, when you look at also where the consultations are happening, again, it's restricted to urban areas, urban centers, and you're seeing the same kind of faces, or characteristics in terms of people who are being consulted or informed about the new currency and trying to bring them on board. But it really is then about growing down to the grassroots. What does this currency mean and the new policy mean for someone who's farming cotton in Gokwe, at the end of the day? And what are their concerns? And in what way then are those concerns going to be addressed or are being addressed? Yeah. Information, I think there needs to be more clear information and accessible information. One of the things that I've realized is that, I don't know if you've come across it, but the monetary policy statement is not even in Shona or any of the Ndebele or, any of the vernacular language. I don't even know if it's in Braille, but it's, again, it's, it's something that's key, that's fundamental for the country. But it's, again, it's taking up that, it's an exclusive posture. Then I think finally is around communication, and communication being a two-way process. The aspect around vulnerability that you highlighted, that, you have to admit where you've maybe made a misstep, and again, open it up. If you're hearing feedback, around why citizens feel or have the concerns that they have, in what ways are you then going back? Yeah. Because again, it could be another roadshow of information sessions and so forth, and then they'll go back into their ivory tower along Samora Machel and continue doing what they do until the next monetary policy statement, or if there's a crisis or a challenge, you come back and then you rework or rethink something, but you've never then heard or addressed the issues or challenges that citizens have raised with you. And I think now ensuring that participation, it requires a mindset shift within themselves as well, within policymakers, but it becomes a practice. It's not, we're talking about the ZIG and the currency because that's the topic at the moment, but I think it extends across all levels of government, central, local government, anyone who's elected into office.
Tendai, you talk about constructive communication, clear and constructive communication. I think we all communicate, and as far as they're concerned, they're communicating. So as a person who's engaged in civic engagement and making sure that people participate, what does that look like?
Constructive
communication.
Yeah, from a participation angle, it's very interesting. Look at how, it's dramatic, yeah? So you have the shock and awe, you have, there's talk that there's going to be a new currency, but we don't know it until the day. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, we've come with the silver bullet, and they throw 2 silver bullets, new governor, new currency. That's not how you run a country. That's not how you run a democracy. Yeah? You have to engage people. You have to sound people. So that's not communication. Because communication is, we have a problem. Yeah? Zimbabweans, we are facing a problem. Inflation, transactions are tough, cost of goods, etc. What shall we do? Which ones are the concerned or directly implicated agencies of government? Central bank is one of them, but there are many others. The ministry itself, the Ministry of Social Welfare, that cluster. Then we begin to say, how do we talk to people? That's constructive engagement. Because communities, they may look like they are not engaged. They are. There are residents associations, there are different welfare associations we have that we could have used to say, let's try to get a consensus on how we move forward. But then the danger, and it's not only this government, but many 21st century government, they think of throwing silver bullets to problems. They short-circuit the problem. They say, here's your solution. So to them, their solution was new governor, new currency. And I wish the governor very well. I think from what I've heard, he's a well-meaning expert, etc. But his job is different from what he used to do in his previous life. Because the job of a governor is actually maybe not to stay too much in the ivory tower that Eddah made reference to, is actually to begin to understand people who consume his policies, people who actually interact with his monetary policy. He needs to have a mechanism to get feedback. And I'm sort of excited by the fact that he was one of the first people to say, this thing faces the risk of being sort of rejected by the market. But I was surprised by where he went. He went into internal reforms, which is okay. So we hope that in the internal reforms, there could come up something that says we need to be more outward facing. Because at the moment, they're just a concrete block that is locked up, inaccessible. You can't just go in and see your governor anytime. Yeah? So when they begin to realize that they need to remove the physical and imagined walls around them so that they can begin to sit in a town hall, not only at parliament, but in a town hall, and talk to youths at the university, talk to women in the marketplace, not talk down to them, but come with notebooks. That's constructive engagement, which is necessary. When you begin to see experts, instead of addressing us, they come with notebooks. They begin to write our concerns. They begin to go back and brainstorm on concerns raised. That's when we have a different kind of government. Because at the moment, we still continue on the same slippery path or slippery slope of an expert-led, alienated government that does its own thing and just decides to say that every day they're going to shock us with new measures. We wake up now, they're arresting money changers, now they have a new SI, now they are doing this, now they are doing this. It doesn't help us. We have a problem that is affecting this country, and we are all facing the problem. So how do we engage collectively in solving the problem? So in a nutshell, the work that we do at Seville Institute is actually not just about criticizing government. Like I said, technically some of these policies sound good. The blog I wrote about this currency, I'm in favor of what they've said technically about the currency. But for me, the missing ingredient is how they've introduced it. Because like now you want to consult after the fact, you've introduced the currency. What will our consultation help with? Really? If we say, if it's the general feeling that you should withdraw the ZIG, would they withdraw it? Perhaps there's another way of looking at government, and for me it's bottom up. The top-down, expert-led approaches have brought us this far, and the lack also of integrity amongst public officials, because I strongly believe that what always causes the downfall of a currency is not those youngsters that were arrested as currency changers. Those are their effect on the rate is very minimal. In many instances, the government destroys its own currency, and they have to look at themselves and say, at what point did they do that? When they make big payments to contractors, and those contractors within a day are trying to make sure they get United States dollars. That's when the rate moves. That's really because there's no one in this country with the capacity to tank a rate at the rate at which the previous currency was collapsing, except government itself and other bigger businesses. So all these activities, arresting those youngsters, etc., does not really contribute to any change. Because we have to ask ourselves, what has happened since they were arrested? Is the rate stabilized?
Some hard questions there right at the end. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Tendai. Thank you, Eddah, for joining me. Would love to continue this conversation, but please do share your thoughts with us. What are your thoughts around the currency? What are your thoughts around policy making? And possibly, maybe you have solutions. Do share them with us. Thank you so much for joining us. Please do follow us. Please do subscribe, and we'll see you again in the next episode. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking time to listen. Please feel free to rate and review us on iTunes. But if you have any comments or questions, please send them to my email, tendai.murisa@gmail.com, or hit us up on Twitter. My handle is @tmurisa. Thank you again.